Good evening, and welcome to Tanz im August Special Edition 2020. And welcome to the Tanz im August studio, which is located at Haut 2. This is where we meet every evening to tell you a little bit about the program, introduce today's program, and then also give you little tips of the coming days. Today, before we dive into today's Happy to Listen, which is the second Happy to Listen, I would like to give you first some tips. And the first tip is to now go to 1000 Scores website. 1000 Scores is a project that we are sharing with Helgard Haug, David Helbich, and Cornelius Puschke, who have created this new kind of online performance space where which is accumulating scores. Tanz im August has commissioned 5 scores. We have so far released 2, Maija Hirvonen, the Finnish choreographer, and Choka Phai, the Singapore-based artist who at least sometimes lives and works in Berlin. Today is our 3rd score out. The name of the score is Doubled Roped Party, and it is done by Chiara Persani, Italian artist and a performer. Some of you know Chiara Persani from her work. She has visited Berlin and she has toured quite a lot in Europe with her latest work, Unicorn. Her work is often, it's performing arts work, which is heavily influenced by choreographic practices and contemporary dance, but also by her research. As a performer, she has collaborated with many names that you might know, with Alessandro Sciarroni, Rodrigo Garcia, and Jérôme Bell, to mention just few of the collaborators that she has worked with. She has been awarded the prestigious UBU Prize as the Best Performer under 35 in 2019. She's quite invested in the questions of body politics. She herself is suffering from a moderate osteogenesis imperfecta. So her research, her performance work is always speaking from a very special point of view and perspective. Double roped party. So this actually means what it says. It means you have to find a partner, because this score cannot be done alone. You have to find someone to do it with you. And Chiara is giving us one little tip how to do that. He asks you to look in a mirror and ask, who would I want to get lost with in the forest? This is hard for me, because I was born in the city. But if I would get lost in the city, I would probably want to get lost with my cousins who lived in the countryside and who know how to get out of the forest too. So I already know who I would call and do this piece with. So you do the same, think about it, and go to the website 1000scores.com, and you can find all this information there. Then, about tomorrow. Tomorrow we meet an artist who has been with us before, and we're very much looking forward to welcoming him back this year. Tomorrow we will meet Arkadi Tsaides and his collaborators who have been working on a piece called Necropolis. Necropolis is what it sounds like. It is the city of the death. And what Arkadi has been involved with lately is to track down the unmarked graves of paperless migrants and asylum seekers, some of those who try to get to Europe, who maybe never get there alive, and whose bodies are in unmarked graves, not even unmarked, but graves all around Europe, some of them even in Berlin. And this research is turning into some kind of a growing archive of bodies. And of course, this is also a kind of a database for the future. So it's done in a close collaboration with some NGOs. They will present a film, for 45-minute long film tomorrow, about this work. After the film, they will be joined by Igor Dobchit and Emma Giola. Igor is a dramaturg who's working with Arkady on this, and then Emma Giola is a dancer and choreographer and a researcher who has joined them in this project. So I hope you will join us tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock to see Necropolis film. Then, the last but not the least, today's program. So today is our second Happy to Listen. It's actually one of those Happy to Listens that really pushed us to really think what we are doing and how we are doing things. And we are very grateful for the participants who will speak tonight in the Inviting Anti-Ableist Futures. Today we will hear from Neve Mazique, who is disabled, multigendered, femme, FOB, mixed race, Black African choreographer and a dancer, also composer, singer, writer, actor, painter, model, Hoodoo Voodoo Magician, and a performance artist. Also a 2020 Pina Bausch Fellowship, and one of the first 2 Americans to receive this award. We will have there Kim Simpson, who works from her base in Glasgow, a Glasgow-based curator, producer, facilitator, and a coach. She goes under the name Blood and Bone, and she's drawing from her lived experience of disability in her work, I would say in all the work she does. And she is drawing that to the connective tissues of the arts and society. And is less maybe concerned about what we do than how we do those things. So we are very happy to have Kim with us, who is a CLOR Leadership Fellow at the moment. And then Noa Winter. Noa Winter is a queer, disabled, chronically ill curator and a dramaturg. She's who currently works as a coordinator for the project Making a Difference, which supports disabled choreographers and dancers in Berlin. They facilitate workshops on ableism and accessibility, as well as a symposia such as Exploded Times, Mad Spaces, Disability Arts, and Crip Spaces. This session will be 90 minutes long, and it will be reflecting on the text written by disabled artists during the pandemic. And the talk will be conducted in English with English subtitles. There will be simultaneous translation in German and translation in British and German sign languages. To get the full benefits of these languages, you have to register via Zoom. You can do it now by going to our website. You can find there a link to get to the Zoom and the webinar. This also allows you to participate in the questions and answers session afterwards. If that is too much, you don't want to register, no worries. You can always go to our YouTube channel where we are streaming this talk and many of the other talks also live. While the speakers are getting ready, I just want to remind you that we have some great books downstairs in our library, which you might want to go and have a look, to be where you can get deeper into the topics of today, crip theory here. Please come over and have a look. It's really worthwhile the trip to come over. The library is open every day from 4 o'clock till 10 o'clock, and we are happy to serve you there, taking into account all the hygienic regulations and social distancing rules. But otherwise, just come over and we'll figure out how you can come in safe. So we let the speakers get ready. We let you, dear audience, get ready. And I wish you a very, very nice evening with our fabulous speakers. And we'll see you tomorrow with new topics and new guests. with these words, have a nice evening.
My name's Kim Simpson. I'm just going to check that the access is all working okay. And I'm having a conversation with Neve Mazique and Noa Winter called Anti-Ableist Futures, inviting anti-ableist futures as part of the Ready to Listen Tanz in August discussion program. But I want to start by just doing some housekeeping, and then I'm going to bring Neve and Noa in to introduce themselves. The webinar offers closed captioning in English, simultaneous translation in German, and German and English sign language translation. The functions for these are at the bottom of the screen, near the question and answer and chat buttons. We have our sign language interpreters that you can see on the screen, and every 15 minutes they will change. The British sign language interpreters will change. Our German sign language interpreter, Oya, will be doing the whole session, which we'll discuss in a moment. And at the end of the session, we, in 1 hour, at the end of 60 minutes, we have audience questions. And I might come back to the instructions for that when we get to that point, just so that we can get Neve and Noa into the discussion. Hi. Hi, Neve.
Hello.
Hi. Can you tell us who you are, Neve? Maybe that's a good start.
Sure. My name is Neve. I go by Neve for performance. My full name is Neve Mazique. My gender pronouns are they, them, theirs, he, him, his, and she, her, hers. That's the order of preference as well. But you can mix them up if you want. I like them all. And I am a performance artist and choreographer and disability justice activist and theorist.
Thank you so much, Neve. It's been really exciting to have you in this conversation and to be preparing it with you as well. Noa, hi, who are you? Can you hear us okay, Noa? Hi.
Hi. Sorry, I think I lost you for one moment, but I think you want me to introduce myself, right?
Yeah.
So, my name is Noa Winter. I'm the Berlin-based person in this conversation. I'm queer, I'm white, I'm disabled, and I'm chronically ill. And I mostly work as a curator slash dramaturg slash producer, as a freelancer, doing a lot of work around ableism and accessibility to performance spaces, and disability lab spaces in general. And currently I'm also working for the Berlin-based project Making a Difference, that tries to support disabled and deaf artists based in Berlin on their way into establishing themselves in the Berlin dance scene.
Thank you, Noa. My name's Kim Simpson, as I said. I'm based in Glasgow. I'm a white, female, disabled producer, curator, facilitator, and coach. And I work in lots of different ways with lots of different people, and many of them are disabled. And yeah, I think that's enough about me. What I'd really like to do is to start by setting the tone for this conversation, because I'm named as a moderator, but in our discussions we talked about how that doesn't feel comfortable for me to hold that role in that way. So we're going to have more of an informal conversation. So one thing I wanted to do first, though, Noa, is just to ask you to talk a little about the German Sign Language interpretation. If that's okay.
Yes. So just to acknowledge, as Kim said earlier, we have 2 BSL interpreters, but unfortunately, or we are very glad that Oya agreed to do that, we only have 1 German Sign Language interpreter, which of course means that it's a lot harder for Oya to do that job. That means we will have a break in our discussion to give her a break, because we got asked really late, like only a few weeks ago, to do this event. And when we were asked to do this event, we said that we also wanted this conversation to be as accessible as possible. But of course, only within a few weeks, it was already really late to find interpreters, especially with the additional workload for German Sign Language interpreters, because we are having this conversation in English. So they basically have to do double the work, because so we really wanted to acknowledge that we know that this situation is not perfect, but that we will try to do the best to make it as accessible as possible, and that maybe we will come back to that later, that we believe that of course it's part of an anti-ableist futures to make things as accessible as possible, and to also say that access comes before what we might call the perfect form, the perfect aesthetic, or professionalism. So maybe you would think it would be more professional of us to have this conversation in a row without the break in between. But to ensure that the quality of interpretation is as high as possible, we will of course pause our conversation to make sure that the access workers, as here are the interpreters, get their breaks as well. That's maybe all that's to say to this.
Thanks, Noa. Also, I think when we were talking about the German interpretation, it was also acknowledged that this speaks to a lack of the numbers of people available to support these kinds of conversations as well. The other thing we were going to do was just set some definitions that we have used as our kind of, I'll explain very briefly that in preparing for this conversation, we together put a list of writing that we've read by other disabled artists, mostly written during the pandemic, and we've used that as a kind of getting on board with each other, finding, our common conversation, and just to take inspiration and reference from some people who are doing some great work out there. And so Neve is also going to give us some of their definitions that they use, and I think Noa will give us one as well, which is helpful to set out at the start of this conversation. Thanks, Neve.
You want me to start?
Yeah, is that okay? Thank you.
That's great. You can hear me all right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was asked to speak up, so I just thought I would take my computer off of the pillow that it was on, because sometimes that makes it a little muffled. This is a three definitions that are interwoven, a definition of magic, a definition of medicine, and a definition of disability from a creative essay I wrote called Disabled Queer Witches at the End of This World. For my purposes, let's establish a few rules for this science. Magic is medicine, and medicine is magic. Disability is the chronic, unexpected behavior of literally any part of your body, mind, heart, face, soul, personality, organs, bones, muscles, joints, inside, outside, congenital, acquired, situational, traumatic, apparent, inapparent. And there is no such thing as being too disabled or not disabled enough. Disability justice is magic or medicine, as is the choice to identify culturally and politically as disabled and to center access and liberation for all in one's life.
Thank you, Neve. Noa, we were going to set a definition of ableism that we came across in our reading, or I came across in the reading. It was maybe already known by you both.
Yes, we choose that definition to give you an idea, a first idea of what we mean actually when we have this title, Anti-Ableist Futures. And it's a working definition by Talia T.L. Lewis, and it was created in conversation specifically with disabled Black or otherwise racialized folks. And the definition is: ableism is a system that places value on people's bodies and minds based on societally constructed ideas of normalcy, intelligence, excellence, and productivity. These constructed ideas are deeply rooted in anti-Blackness, eugenics, colonialism, and capitalism. The form of systematic oppression leads to people and society determining who is valuable and worthy based on a person's appearance and or their ability to satisfactorily reproduce, excel, and behave. You do not have to be disabled to experience ableism.
Thank you, Noa. That's great. So just to pause for a second and explain, I guess, a little what it feels like we've done there, which is to set out the definitions that we're using so that people are accessing the conversation where we are. And also by providing the access that's been provided, we're trying to create a boundary around ourselves, one where we can have a really good conversation between us as disabled people in this art sector. And just to take that one step further, I would just like to pause there because I get very nervous in these kinds of situations, and just take 3 really deep breaths. And that's for me. That's for everyone in this conversation. That's also for the team at Tanz August, who I know have been working flat out on the festival. So before we go any further, and also I would encourage you to notice that Neve and Noa and I are seated pretty comfortably. We're just going to swap interpreters as well. Let's just take a pause. Fantastic. Yeah, we're seated pretty comfortably. Like I may even lie down at some point because I feel very comfortable lying down. But before we do that, we're just going to take 3 deep breaths, and then we'll carry on with the conversation. Okay, deep in. Hold for a second. Thanks. I feel better. So, Neve, Noa, we prepared a few questions. I'm just going to ask one to get us started. Anti-ableist futures. What does an anti-ableist future look and feel like? Who's brave enough to start? Neve?
It's just the 3 of us talking. It's morning, so so everyone knows it's whatever's minute it is today. 9:17 a.m. and we've been up since 6. Starting a little groggy, so I would love to hop into the conversation. Someone else can start.
Yeah, of course. Noa, do you have? I mean, also Noa and I are at the end of the day. This is the other thing about anti-ableist futures is like time, and when we have these conversations is also a thing, isn't it? And the ways that we do it. Noa, would you like to kick off there?
Yes. Maybe I kick off with something very simple before drifting up into theoretically stuff, I might say. An anti-ableist future to me would be like, it would feel cozy. And I think the spaces we created for ourselves, even though for neither of us it's the best time to talk or the most accessible time to have this talk, I think each of us tried the best we could to make ourselves as comfortable and as cozy as possible, which I often find hard in ableist art spaces, to actually say, yes, this is my access need. I need a beanbag. I need a couch. Chairs are not accessible to me. And I think this is where we have steps to go, especially when we talk about anti-ableist future, that we get rid of that idea, that only a person sitting vertical on a chair in professional clothes, whatever that is a good listener, is a good spectator, is the person that is in the conversation, but that there are actually many, many different forms of attending to what other people say, to their artwork, to a conversation, whatever. So that's maybe the first thing.
Cozy is such a great word. I think also when I was thinking about this question last night, I reread a line from Neve's text actually, which said, "You're magic every day and no one needs to harness you for it to be okay for you to exist." And that kind of feels like almost like a manifesto for an anti-ableist future. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, and it was in reference, that line was in reference to the Umbrella Academy specifically. And I really like relating science fiction to imagining what is possible, because I think often when we think about science fiction or speculative fiction, when we speculate about what the future might look like, it's often less equitable than things are now. I feel like people are like, and in the future we will have a fascist dystopia, and I'm like, isn't that what's happening right now? Can't we imagine something that would be a little better than that? But yeah, I think like control is something that I don't want in my anti-ableist future. So coziness to me feels like a letting go of these things that contain us and hold us together and make us feel like we have to present ourselves as one indivisible unit, you know, or like we're not complicated, like we don't have bodies and emotions and feelings and time zone differences and all of these things, you know. I was thinking about professional dress, and literally I was like, oh, they look like they have lapels, so I'm gonna just get a shirt that has lapels on it.
This is literally pajamas. I'm not even kidding. This is pajamas. It's just lapel-based pajamas. Oh, I love it.
Well, good to know. Thank you. Thank you for that. But yeah, I agree about coziness. An anti-ableist future would also be anti-racist to me. It would be anti-capitalist. It would, well, just like you said, Noah, about how our priority needs to be access over getting something done on time or looking a certain way or fitting a certain expectation of what a panel is going to look like or sound like or feel like. I think similarly, an anti-ableist future is one that is pro bodies and pro the complexity of existence, rather than creating structures that are meant to control and dampen existence, which is often what a lot of institutional structures feel like to me.
That it's really interesting you're mentioning the almost like a deprofessionalization. I'm thinking a lot about deprofessionalization of art and the way that we approach and the world actually, and rehumanization. And yesterday I had this idea while I was out for a walk, and I wanted to write, deprofessionalization, rehumanization, and my phone auto-corrected it to the opposite. Reprofessionalization and dehumanization. I thought, isn't that interesting that that's what my phone thinks I want to say? I think that's fascinating. It's an iPhone. It's literally like telling me what the world that I live in, you know?
They're like, didn't you mean to say?
Yeah. There's also something for me about feeling rested. No, I'm sure all three of us can relate to this idea of like an anti-ableist future being one where you wake. I mean, I'm always curious about how rested I would feel if I existed in a society that wasn't ableist. And I never feel rested, but how much of that is because of the condition or impairments or experience I have of being alive, and how much of that is because I'm trying to do it now in this time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, rest.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I just think like the trauma there's so much like trauma of expectation in day-to-day existence. I feel like as a disabled person, as a Black person, as a queer and trans person, I'm often feeling like I'm trying to make excuses for why I am the way I am, or for why I'm doing something the way I'm doing something, you know, on top of doing a lot of educational labor and emotional labor, on top of doing things that are supposedly my job, because none of those things are actually my job. And so, yeah, the level of unrest that I feel like many of us experience, not just in a day, but in a lifetime, is really immense. Yeah, I can't completely imagine what being extremely well rested would look like. Although I am blessed and privileged to be a very deep sleeper, so my body will persist in sleeping. It's like my body's solution to every difficulty, trauma, illness, stress is like sleeping. But I wouldn't say that I feel like relaxed in my day-to-day life, and I feel like an anti-ableist future, although it might be challenging, because I don't think that we ever like reach a point where we're at the ideal future and now we can stop working on things. I think it'll always be challenging and engaging to create and sustain an anti-ableist future, because that's sort of the you know, we can't just like reach nirvana, right? We have to like be cultivating it like gardeners. But I feel like maybe I would not have to make so many excuses or explanations for myself.
I can really relate to that as well. I think the unrest we all feel is very closely connected to the various experience of oppression and discrimination each of us faces in their daily life. And of course, also the additional labor we always have to do to make things accessible for ourselves, to make things accessible for other disabled and deaf and chronically ill and neurodiverse people we care about. So that, yeah, maybe people who are more privileged than us can actually kind of turn off after their work, but we can't, because we still have all that additional labor that keeps us from resting, or that it's actually us again having to put more labor into finding ways to still rest in this ableist and racist and not queer friendly environments we're in. So I think that's closely connected. And to what you have said in the end, Neve, about that still there would be this kind of work to do to sustain an anti-ableist future. But I think an anti-ableist future would also be a lot about sharing the work, sharing the labor, for example, around access, that at the moment in at least 99% of the cases, we have to do all on our own, because non-disabled people are not sharing the work, even though they have all the privileges. So it would be actually easier for them to do the work.
I'm gonna just on that point of rest and work, I'm just gonna take a short, let's say 5-minute break, just so that we can give our German Sign Language interpreter a rest, and so we can take a rest. And when I come back, I feel like we've answered the questions, what does an anti-ableist future look and feel like? And also, what does the ableist present look and feel like? So when we come back, we'll maybe talk a little about what the pandemic has revealed as well. So yeah, let's just take 5 minutes. And if you're watching, just, you know, breathe, lie down, get some tea. We'll see you in 5. Yawn. Oh, for those that can't see this, there's a chat window here that's telling me when I can start again. Hi. We're good to go. I was just reading a couple of excerpts from some of the texts that we read that felt like they maybe sum up some of our conversation from just before the break. There was the Raju Rage one, which, and I'm making sure I mention these because if you're watching this, I really recommend that you also go and read all the resources which are in the event page. The problems are clear and have been stated repeatedly. Naming them becomes a distraction and a drain from seeking something else instead. Often we, the marginalized, are called to solve problems, though we aren't listened to when we use our precious energy to try. This results not only in exceptional individualistic status, careerism, and tokenism, but also in emotional battle fatigue, a deep exhaustion, and trauma that manifests in our bodies as actual feelings, which it feels very powerful to me. I don't know.
It's so interesting as a person where it is part of my condition to experience chronic pain and chronic fatigue, because you simply often cannot tell if the fatigue comes from your condition or comes from the society we are living in and the experience we make.
Yeah, I agree.
So what has the pandemic revealed? Because I think it's maybe useful to reflect on where the idea for this conversation came from. Was what is it that disabled people know already, and that people are just kind of discovering during a pandemic that we are. What is the pandemic revealing or catalyzing about the worlds that we live in? And I guess what is it that us as disabled people can see that maybe others can't?
Well, I would definitely say and here's my dog Violet again.
Oh, Violet. So cute, Violet.
It's funny. She's an old lady. Well, I guess from a US perspective, and I would very much like to hear the differences in the UK and Germany, but it's really revealed to a lot of folks the absolute need for universal healthcare, which we don't have. Healthcare is all monetary based, job based, and really expensive here. And so I do think that there has been an increase in folks being like, oh, that's problematic, because of the wide swath of folks who have gotten sick and died from coronavirus. And there has also been an additional reveal about how, I mean, we already knew this as disabled people, but how little, how disabled and chronically ill life is valued less and valued as like already being a lower quality of life. That's like a big medical phrase here, is to somehow numerically ascertain someone's quality of life and then decide whether or not they warrant treatment. And multiple disabled people in the US have died because they were literally denied treatment, because being quadriplegic or physically disabled or mentally disabled in some other way supposedly meant that their life wasn't as valuable. So I feel like coronavirus has really brought into stark relief in my own life the very real intersections between Black Lives Matter and disability justice, and like Black disabled lives matter, because as the definition of ableism that Noa read States, these anti-Black racism, I would say anti-Indigenous racism, are so tied up in ableism and how we function as an ableist society. So I feel like coronavirus, and especially the moment that we're in, where we're a very internet connected global community in many ways, I feel like these conversations are happening more frequently. Like I'm seeing them happen in more depth, and also like I'm seeing all of a sudden an acknowledgement that disabled people are here and have been saying things about our lives for a long time. I think there's a disabled sense of humor that is getting shared a little bit more by some non-disabled folks who are having to use Zoom and Google Hangout and Meet and all these other online platforms to connect. There's kind of a goofiness about the limitations of technology and like the limitations of professionalism, of starting on time, of making sure everything is working and there's no holes anywhere, that I a little bit has to be like let go of and like brushed off, and replacing that with a kind of humor and flexibility, I feel like is really a disabled gift and like a gift of disabled community. Yeah, which relates back to me to like an anti-ableist future would be funny. I are really funny, and I feel like that would be a big part of it.
Yeah, it does get very serious, doesn't it, in our world?
Yeah.
And actually, we have to have a sense of humor, otherwise we would not be able to survive this.
Right, exactly. Our senses of humor are our saving grace, our resilience,
And one of the things you said there also, one of the articles was Crutches and Spice. Imani Barbaran had said something about still industries seem to be confronted with the existence of disabled people like it was a new development, not as though we'd been there all along, which of course we have. So yeah, what about for you, Noa? What's coming up for you about what the pandemic is revealing or catalyzing at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, this feeling that I think I saw it, for example, on Twitter or in general on the socials a lot, that yeah, we also had to have this dark humor as a community of this, oh, now the whole remote access to work, to performances that we asked for years for is now suddenly possible when able people need it. And also I had quite a lot, I think my bonds to various disabled people got much stronger during the pandemic, also because we had frequent talks about that now non-disabled people telling us that they suddenly understand our lives, and we were just like, no, you don't, because at the moment nobody can go to a performance, so it's not the same as us being excluded from your spaces when you can go normally. So that's maybe, I think, to say something for like the global people to the situation in Germany. Yes, we have a much better healthcare system than I think both the US and the UK. So we have much fewer deaths, but at the same time, we also have these eugenic ideas about which life is worth and which life is unworthy a lot, because we are not yet at that point in Germany, but there are basically like guidance by like these societies of doctors for intensive care, and they use something called a fragility scale. So, and fragility scale basically means you get, if there is a shortage of ventilations because there are too many people needing ventilation in the hospital, then you will be rated based on this fragility scale, and you get you are not likely to get a ventilator already starting if you use a cane, like for example I use. You're even worse up in the scale if you use a wheelchair, or if you need personal assistance, so if you can't do all your daily tasks for yourself. So these kind of eugenic ideas are embedded in the German society in the same way. And of course, we have this very special history also with T4 and stuff. And actually, during the pandemic, like 2 months ago, they passed a new law that makes it harder for people who are living a life needing ventilation, like in general. They make it harder for them to stay at home and to get the care and the assistance they need at home. So the law basically opens the door for actually these people getting institutionalized. And that's happening in the same time as this pandemic, where we are talking so much about the whole topic of needing ventilation to stay alive. It's just, and also seeing that your risk of dying in an institution is so much higher than when you live at home with personal care. So yeah, that's something that is happening here as well, but it's less visible. So I think also these connections between different marginalized groups who all have a harder time in the pandemic, like disabled folks, chronically ill folks, racialized folks. It's unfortunately not so close here in Germany. Many people don't make these connections. I think that's something where we really can learn from the US and maybe also from the UK, that especially in times of pandemics and in times of crisis in general, it's so important to have these connections as different groups of marginalized people. And that would also be for me part of an anti-ableist future, that it's not just about disabled and chronically ill people, but like Neve already said, that it would also be an anti-racist future, an anti-capitalist future, that we would need to center all kind of marginalized people and their needs in an anti-ableist future.
I'm just going to pause for a second for the ESL interpreters to swap. Great. Thank you, Oya. Yeah, there's something like it's this idea of centering disabled people. And when you communicate the idea of centering communities in a context that favors the institution, that favors patriarchy, I think it's actually like a concept that can't easily be processed. It's almost like it can't fully be understood. That's one of the things I'm feeling is, and maybe it's also my own journey of of really trying to understand what it means to center disabled people. And there's something about stories being mediated through a professionalized lens, or that place where things happen that is gathering under it, and how that changes what it is, and actually stops us making those connections with other communities that ultimately, when we're all together, vastly outweigh the sort of the perfect fit for this like institutional model. I mean, there must be so few people that really thrive in that kind of environment. And I think that's one of the things that feels like it's being made visible by a pandemic, is just how fragile actually we all are, and how interconnected we all are. And that when you place extra pressure on that system, it cracks. And the people that feel it most are the people who are already at the margins. But everybody can probably say that they're experiencing something different in the pandemic than is their sort of day to day. And what can we do now? So what can we do now to invite an anti-ableist future? And I guess that's like us ourselves, but also in the arts, which has enormous potential for being a place that we can tell new stories. What do you think it is that we need to do now? Where do we go? Let's fix it.
No.
I have these proposals. No, I mean, I have ideas, but I certainly am not going to be proposing them in a formal way right now. But I'm really on this de-organization tip, actually, which is funny because I am also technically an organizer. I don't know. That always just makes me think of, you know, this movie, Stranger Than Fiction, I think it's called, where it's like Emma Thompson and Will Ferrell is in a novel, and Emma Thompson narrating his life because she's a novelist. Anyway, there's like this part where they talk about anarchists, and they say an anarchist organization. And then someone says, do anarchists like organize? Isn't that against the point? And at the time I was like, no, we organize. But I think that what it is that for me, always thinking about the individual in relationship to the community, and always thinking about the community in relationship to the individual. Those are principles of anarchism, or liberated socialism, however you want to think about it. But where we are guided by this relationship, and we work on creating the thread between the individual and the community, and we don't lose sight of either one. I think that is what I'm working on in myself and in my work and in my liberation work, I guess I'll say, rather than saying organizing work, is recognizing that the organization is never more important than the people in it. And I think that would be such a huge and radical shift, especially in the arts, that I don't even know how to say something beyond that, because I feel like we so don't even know what that would look like. And there's been a lot of efforts, especially on the East Coast of the United States, but on the West Coast as well. We're often pretty bi-coastal in terms of our disability-related activism, although there is a lot everywhere. But this move to decolonize art institutions and to be kind of dismantling, similar to how we're getting rid of, imperialist statues all over the place. Let's also think about the imperialism of these institutions, right? And how they don't actually always serve the individuals within them. So yeah, I think my thought for myself and what I think we need to do as an initial thing is remember people. Remember people and remember yourself, and remember that if you have feelings, other people probably do too.
Well, it seems like you shouldn't have to say it, but sometimes we do.
Right, but that we could communicate so much more than we do, and that we could find accessible ways to communicate with one another, and that's actually possible. That the only way to start doing that is by asking each other, not like assuming that there has to be a bureaucratic protocol for how we ask one another questions, but really just yeah. So I think I advocate for a sort of informality, because I think that it is formality that sometimes slows down these processes.
It's almost like codified group behavior, isn't it? Like you're saying, this is how we do things here, which has a sort of like short-term benefit for quite like a small number of people, but then closes things down to so many others that you just get stuck in this kind of like cycle.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to not seek the easiest way of communication, but the most accessible and most, I don't like the word appropriate kind of conversation. I'm looking for a word that I like better, but maybe I don't find it at the moment. Like what I want, like I think one, correct me if I'm wrong, Neve, because you know a lot more about it than I do, but if I remember it right, one central principle of disability justice is also to prioritize the people who are most marginalized. And I think that's a thing very important that I also always have to remind myself of. So, for example, that as a disabled, chronically ill person, but as a hearing person, I definitely have certain privileges over deaf colleagues and friends of mine in the arts world. And to always keep that in mind, and to always invite these people who are more out of the conversations we're having than I am, to always try to invite these people into the conversation as well. And just to add that, because I don't know how is that in your countries, from my view as an outsider, I would always say I'm looking up to the UK and to the US in terms of actually this disability-led approach, meaning that it should be disabled people who are leading that change. And here in Germany, where it's still often about the non-disabled people and the hearing people speaking for the disabled and deaf people in the arts on what kind of access they need, what kind of support they need, etc. And really, really need to change that. We really, need to ask people what they need, and also in what way, if we use that word, they would like to be included. Because to coming back to the text we mentioned earlier by Raju Rage, the text was also talking about that at the moment being included into the art sector still needs to assimilate for marginalized people. So I think also an anti-ableist future that I would like to invite, and I hope you would like to invite, is a future where nobody has to assimilate to be part of anything.
That's a fantastic anti-ableist future to invite, and definitely Neve as well. I hear the tension between individual and community, and the thing I've been thinking about a lot, which also relates to privilege, because I don't appear disabled unless I disclose. I have white privilege, I have height privilege, I have all kinds of privilege. So I'm also thinking about, and this is something I can do as an individual, but that I invite institutions to do as well, is to understand the power dynamic that they are in, and to actively, caringly, mindfully set up collaboration that acknowledges those power dynamics and the differences within those lived experiences. But yeah, the anti-ableist future where we don't have to assimilate, how wonderful would that be?
Yeah, and Noah, you're right. I wanted to just add that that is absolutely a principle of disability justice. There are 10, and what is being referenced was originally a working draft by Patty Byrne of Sins Invalid and other collaborators, and now is in its most recent form in disability justice. What's that word? Work
Primer, I think it is called.
Yes. I was like, prime. Yeah, that's not a word that I think of ever. Disability justice primer, second edition. Which I really recommend. But yeah, the centering the needs and the leadership of the most impacted by oppression and the most marginalized. So not necessarily thinking of disability as like a hierarchy of oppression, like you're more disabled than you, but more so thinking of an accumulation of the intersections of identity. So thinking like, if you are Black and you are queer and you are trans and you are disabled in multiple ways and you are poor, believing and trusting that someone who is centering disability and who is more marginalized than you has the expertise and the agency and the ability to lead the movements and to invite the futures that we want, because I think a lot of it has to do with this belief that we can't speak for ourselves. To kind of speak to Noah, what you were saying about how there's often non-disabled leadership trying to imagine or guess or decide what disabled people need. And it doesn't have to be a guessing game. It could be like a direct question and answer kind of thing. And there don't have to be institutions and foundations in our names for us to be able to speak for ourselves.
Thank you so much, Neve. I'm conscious just of time. We're at the point where we're going to move into a bit more of a question and answer session, and I'm going to let Dion join. And then what I'll do is we'll pause for a few minutes to give Oya another break. So we're going to answer audience questions. We have some help from the Tanz August team just to facilitate that. At the bottom of your screen, if you're in the Zoom webinar, you should be able to see at the bottom that there is a Q&A button, and you can click the Q&A button to ask your question there. If you want to ask a question in British or German Sign Language, instead of typing it, you can hit the raise hand button. And Anna from Tanz August will be in touch on the chat to find out whether that's German or English Sign Language, British Sign Language that you would like to ask your question in. If you're going to ask your question in sign language, you should know that you will appear on the screen, which is being streamed live right now. and also that this session is being recorded, so you will remain in the film thereafter, and we don't have a point at which this film is coming down. So it's just so that you know that if you're going to ask a question with sign language, which we hope you will. And we're just going to take 5 minutes. We'll come back. Oh, Noah, yes, sorry.
Just to mention that, of course, also the written questions can be asked in English and German as well. So if you're not comfortable with asking your question in English, please ask in German.
Thank you so much, Noah. Yes, please do. Anything else, Neve, Noah, that I should? Great. Okay, we're going to take 5 minutes. It will be, we've run a little over because we like talking, sorry. And because there's so much to introduce at the start. But we'll come back at 6:10 and we have 20 minutes for questions. See you soon. Fantastic. We have, yeah, thank you for, I always feel really just stimulated when I talk to other brilliant disabled people like yourselves. So for that, as much as anything, I've just been delighted to have this chance to connect with Noa and Neve. We have a question which I will ask, and then maybe we can have a chat about it. What needs to be done for the institution to become a safe space in capitalism? I see faces going, ooh.
Wow. For the institution to become a safe place in capitalism. So is this the proverbial institution?
I mean, it probably is the proverbial institution, artistic institutions, this institution that have invited us to have this conversation. I think, yeah, it's a huge question, actually. Let's just acknowledge that is a huge question that we're not going to answer in 15 minutes, but we will try to have a conversation about what the institution could be doing. So that's the basis of this answer. How's that?
Yeah, sure. I think that safe is a tough word, because I think that there are many ways that that institutions can become safer, and I think safety is not ever guaranteed, but I think educating yourself as an individual who might be affiliated or associated or employed by an institution, educating yourself around what is currently mattering to disabled people right now, what access looks like to a wide variety of disabled folks, and connecting to, collaborating with, as you'd said, Kim, and being in conversation with disabled people, employing disabled people, contracting with disabled people who are consultants, and being prepared to not do business as usual, because I think that sometimes business as usual is what gets in the way of people's needs actually being met, and it can be a very like, it reminds me of The Crown. I feel like, this is how we do things here, and it's like, we don't have to do things here that way. This place could be a flexible site of inquiry and curiosity and collaboration and gentleness with one another. So I think institutions become safer when they don't care as much about being institutions. And I would say that in capitalism, an institution becomes safer when capitalism is not the driving rule of engagement. So really, I think institutions and capitalism are inherently unsafe.
Yeah. And I love that you're saying that word institution kind of you have to be willing to let that go if you really want to move into a space of safety. And I've been thinking about where that safety grows from, because it doesn't feel like it comes down on top of us. It's too heavy. It has to kind of emerge from the needs of the people that you're talking about. Yeah, what I'm getting there is slow down.
Yeah.
Do less. This is for the institutions. Slow down. Do less. And do it with people who challenge you, and pay them what you pay your senior management staff, because they're worth it. I'm like, if everybody in our sector could just do 50%, as much less actually even than that, give yourself time to process some of the stuff that we're saying, and we might actually have a chance to make room for some more people to do some more stuff. But the slowing down part, I just feel like that's what the pandemic is asking us to do, is to just slow down. Noa, I would love to hear.
Say it again, because I think it can't be said enough. As we are living in a capitalist world, pay disabled people and pay disabled people well, because also we are doing all that extra labor. You don't see all the labor we do, and often you dismiss the extra labor we do when we try to talk about it. We have this knowledge, so pay us for it. And the other thing I would like to add is, and that's coming specifically from a German point of view, because we are like in the privileged position here in Germany to have so much arts funding. So actually most of our institutions, especially the big ones, like for example where we are doing this panel today, is actually secured by capitalism. So you can actually take a lot more risk, and it often makes me sad that we then have to look to the UK or the US, where I see at least more attempts, not enough attempts, and there is still lots of work to do, but I see so much more attempts in the UK and the US from institutions to get a safer space where they are not so well funded. So I actually don't get why German institutions that are so privileged in this capitalist world are not investing more of their money, more of their time, more of their privilege, more of their structures to invest in being safer spaces.
Safer. There's also, I think there's something again from Raju. Obviously, I've spent a lot of time with Raju Rage's text the last wee while, because it just beautifully pulls together all of this stuff and puts it into context. And then speaking to Neve's text and speaking to Amy's text, Amy Rosa from Scotland, and also Alexandra Hemsley has a beautiful poetic piece of writing that we were reflecting on as well. But Raju Rage talks about planting us. Well, I took planting us and nurturing us, because what we need are roots that can't be pulled out and have the depth required to grow, ones that hold tight but are flexible to adapt with the elements they face. Do I need to pause for an interpreter swap? Thanks, Dion. Bridget, cheers. Ones that hold tight but are flexible to adapt with the elements they face, that can breathe and be nurtured to blossom and bloom. When capitalism is destroying our earth and killing us off, when we are forced into competitiveness and precarity, what we need is to plant trees strategically, not cram into crowded buildings. And then I've just added in parenthesis, or crowded cyberspace.
Crowded cyberspace.
Oh, we've got another question. My apologies. We have 9 minutes to answer this question. Okay. From Matthew, what are your thoughts on restorative justice as part of the journey to an anti-ableist future?
I have thoughts.
I knew you would. I'm sure we all have thoughts on this one. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Neve.
So I wanted, maybe I'll do a little like definition in terms of how I understand restorative justice, because it could be understood different ways. My understanding of restorative justice is it's an alternative to punitive justice, an alternative to most countries' current criminal justice system. Restorative justice understands that some kind of damage has been caused by an action or a series of actions, and it seeks to collectively repair all those who have been harmed and all those things such as trust that have been broken, and working to understand in a collective cooperative format how those things can best be repaired so that folks can move forward, rather than saying, okay, it's this person's fault, so we're going to put this person in prison for this amount of time, or we're going to execute this person, or we're going to, et cetera, et cetera. And restorative justice has been used for hundreds of years in many indigenous cultures, as well as many cultures have adopted it as a way of doing things. But I will say that for me, transformative justice is actually the most closely linked to disability justice and to the anti-ableist future that I want to see. And the person who has taught me the most about transformative justice is Leah Lakshmi Pyachna Samaransinga. She has recently written like 1 million books, like one of the most prolific writers I've ever met. And there's care work, yes. Also, one of my best friends also texting me right now, and like just a really, really cool, smart, amazing person. And transformative justice, the difference between transformative justice and restorative justice is that with transformative justice, we're not assuming that things were working in the first place. And so transformative justice is almost like a 365-day-a-year way of thinking about justice and thinking about what dynamics we have, what power dynamics we have, what structures we have, what institutions we have, and how those things are seeking to either uplift or to harm and repress people. And if structures that we're working in are harming and oppressing us, and it's more likely that we're going to harm and oppress one another. So seeking transformation, growth, learning as individuals who may harm one another, as individuals who survive harm, but also seeking transformation and growth as communities. So something that I think about a lot and that we talk about here in the Pacific Northwest of the United States is the idea of not just community accountability, say when someone has been harmed by another person in your community, but also accountable communities. So saying it's never just one person's fault that something has happened, because we are responsible for each other. We are stewarding each other. We are caring for one another. And so, yeah, I absolutely see that kind of justice that is not punitive, that is transformative, that is long-term and slow and about painful conversations and brave reimaginings of how we interact with one another. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Neve. Beautiful response. And that idea of constant change and dynamics and thinking of all of these conversations as part of not ever going to settle. Noa, do you have something you want to add to what Neve just said? I mean, that's...
I don't want to add anything, because I think it's
perfect.
We need transformative justice. We need, I think, to again say that all people need to be involved. So, for example, as long as we still have these institutions, all people working in the institutions need to involve in change, in transformation. Linking to the last question, to become safer spaces. And just to make this very practical note, these ideas, what we often have here in Germany now, of employing one person that is kind of responsible for diversity, or that is responsible for access, that is not what will bring us an anti-ableist future, but transformation where all people, and where also like the teams of the institutions are the collective, and also the audiences and other people from outside the institutions are involved as people who are living in the city where these art spaces, for example, exist. That is what we need.
And going back to that question about what has the pandemic revealed or catalyzed, it is those interconnections. It's the idea of individualism is completely a myth and it doesn't exist, and we had to consider all of these other ways of relating to each other. We just have a couple of minutes left, 2 to be exact, and we have a question about what we're working on artistically, because actually also we have artistic practices of our own. And because we don't have time maybe for a full answer, perhaps it would be good to give, just flag where we can find out more about work that we are involved in. And then that will give me enough time to thank all of our wonderful Access team who have supported with communicating this conversation. Noa, would you like to tell us what's happening with you? Or where we can find out about it?
Damn it, I'm still trying to get a homepage, but as long as I don't have one, you can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, where I'm called @queercrippain, saying everything that's needed. And I'm also going there by my name, Noa Winter, so you will be able to find me. And maybe one thing to mention, that I have the honor of not only working for this project, making a difference, but also co-curating the symposium that will now, because of the pandemic, not happening this November, but happening hopefully in September 2021 here in Berlin at UFO Studios. It will be an international conference, a disability-led conference, and actually the title of the conference, or the theme of the conference, is Owning Spaces. So I think the whole idea of how Kate Marsh, who is my fabulous co-curator, and I try to create this space and conversation with other disabled and deaf people, is that we want to own this space. Yeah.
Thank you, Noa. Neve.
I want to be there for that.
Noted.
In mind. What am I working on? Well, I guess pretty relevant to Tanz im August is I am a 2020 Pina Bausch Fellow from the Pina Bausch Foundation. And so I'm working on a choreographic fellowship with Mark Brew here in the States, who's the artistic director of Axis Dance Company, although he has a long, beautiful, storied dance history, including dancing with Canduco in the UK and doing a lot of other choreographic commissioning work. You can find me on Neve, Neve, bad, BAD.com. And I'm also on all of the things you can imagine at Neve Bad, Twitter and Instagram and YouTube and Twitch, supposedly, and yeah, many of the things. I'm also on Patreon /Neve Bad. So I love interacting with people. Follow me.
Thank you so much, Neve. I'm kind of one of these people who works behind the scenes a lot. I'm currently working, I think the most relevant thing is a project I'm kind of doing some writing, I think is the best way to put it, writing evaluation sort of work, called Not Going Back to Normal, which is a disabled artists manifesto that's being led by two brilliant disabled artists from Scotland called Sasha Sabin Callahan and Harry Josephine Giles, and they have collected manifesto contributions from disabled artists across Scotland and potentially further, and will be releasing it as a website and also as a publication later this year. So the best thing to do for me really is to follow me on Twitter, I think, at Kim Shift. I am absolutely the opposite of Neve. I do not interact. I kind of post things on Facebook, but I'm not very good at social media. And I also don't have a massive profile of my own, but I'm fairly easy to find, and I work with lots of organisations and people in Scotland and in other places, including Take Me Somewhere Festival, which is a festival based out of Tramway in Glasgow. So yeah, I'm happy to be connected with as well, potentially slower to get back to people. I think that just leaves us to say thanks to each other. Like, I have really got so much out of spending this time with the two of you. I want to also be really thankful to Noa, who got very involved with helping to organise this as well, because obviously I'm based in Glasgow. There's a lot I don't understand about Germany, especially when it comes to access. I just want to really acknowledge the additional work that Noa put in as well. And also Neve for joining us so early in the morning. I mean, like, this is your first thing today. It's great.
Yeah. I'm on a panel in Germany in the morning.
Also, thank you so much to Oya Ataman for doing our German Sign Language interpretation, to Bridget and Dion for doing our British Sign Language interpretation, for Virla for doing our, I believe, our captioning. I'm not sure I have a full list of absolutely everybody, but also thank you for the simultaneous language translation as well, which feels like that's been really important. Irina and Bettina, thank you for that. Have I missed anyone, Tanz and August? This is an important part, actually, because we can't have these conversations if we don't have the support, and the support must be acknowledged and all of that stuff too. So, cool. I think that's it. I'm looking forward to being in touch with you still, Noa and Neve, and carrying on our conversations. I've been told to thank myself as well for the Tanz and August team. Thanks, me.
Maybe I can do that.
Thanks, Noa.
Thank you. It was really a pleasure to also do all the pre-communication around access, not alone, but together with you, to Kim, and also for inviting us to have these conversations and having this exchange around different texts that are dear to our hearts. And
thanks to all the artists who wrote them as well, like, for all of that labor that they've put in for us to have some things. And also, I think we have to thank the Tanz and August team for inviting us to have this conversation, and also for working very hard, despite the short time scale, to get all of the people that we needed on board. And we hope that that will always continue to improve as we step into our anti-ableist future that we have conjured together today. Right.
Aww.
Good night. I'm going to sleep now.
Morning. I'm gonna start my day.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.